I have a question for you, and I want you to think about it very carefully. Imagine flying 17 hours straight, completely exhausted, crying your eyes out, just to make it to your father's funeral. Your heart is absolutely shattered. You slowly walk up to the open casket, just wanting to touch his face one last time. But right at that moment, your own older brother aggressively slaps your hand away. In front of 500 elite guests, he points a finger directly in your face and hisses, "How dare you show your face here?" You look over at your mother, completely stunned, expecting her to at least defend you. Instead, your own flesh and blood calls security. Right there, amid the whispers and stares of hundreds of people, 2 massive security guards literally drag you out of the cemetery, like you're a piece of trash off the street, not a daughter. But exactly 3 days later, the game completely changed. The exact same mother and brother who threw you out like garbage are blowing up your phone, crying, literally begging for your mercy. Why? Because they just sat in the estate lawyer's office and watched my dad's final video message, where my dad calmly stated, "My entire life's work, my entire $40 million estate, goes exclusively to my daughter. My wife and son are to get absolutely nothing." Tell me, if this happened to you, what would you do? Would you forgive them? I know you'll watch this video till the very end, just to find out what really happened that night, why my own family despised me, and why my dad made such a shocking decision. And if you love satisfying family revenge stories, Reddit family drama, and true emotional stories, please hit that subscribe button and support Heirnova. If you listen to family drama stories or Reddit stories online, you might think my life sounds like a scripted Hollywood movie, but trust me, every single word of this is true. The biggest tragedy of my life is that I've always been an absolute outsider in my own family. My dad was a highly successful, self-made real estate developer here in Los Angeles. He built his $40 million empire from the ground up, with nothing but grit and sleepless nights. But my mom and my older brother, David, their world was completely different. They only cared about the Beverly Hills Country Club, designer clothes, the latest sports cars, and high society galas. I never fit into their flashy, show-off lifestyle. Because of that, the second I graduated from college, I moved as far away as possible, to Singapore. I wanted to build my own corporate career, on my own terms, without relying on my dad's checkbook. My dad fully supported this. On weekends, while my mom and David were out swiping black cards on Rodeo Drive, my dad would secretly FaceTime me from his home office. He was my rock, my only real emotional support in this world. But to my mom and David, I was just the family's ultimate disappointment. It was a Tuesday, 3 a.m. in Singapore. My iPhone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen flashed an unknown California number. I answered groggily, and a deep, somber voice spoke on the other end. It wasn't my mom. It wasn't David. "Hello, this is Richard Sterling, your father's estate attorney." A cold chill instantly shot down my spine. "I am so incredibly sorry," he said softly. "Robert passed away last night. He had a massive heart attack." I felt like the floor had just caved in beneath me. My dad? My hero? Gone? As I collapsed onto the hardwood floor, sobbing uncontrollably, Richard's next words completely paralyzed me. "The funeral is tomorrow morning at Oakwood Memorial Park. I assumed your mother had told you, but when I didn't see your name on any incoming flight manifests, I felt I had to call you myself. Do you realize how sick that is? My own father died, and my mom and brother didn't even bother to send a text. They intentionally kept it a secret because they wanted to bury him before I could even make it back. I didn't waste a single second. I threw a black dress and my passport into a carry-on and rushed straight to the airport. I boarded the first available 17-hour flight to LAX. I spent half that flight locked in the tiny airplane bathroom, crying my eyes out. But sitting on that plane, I had absolutely no idea about the disgusting public humiliation my own flesh and blood had prepared for me at my father's casket. The Uber pulled up to the massive wrought iron gates of Oakwood Memorial Park just as the service was starting. I was running on zero sleep, my jet lag was suffocating, and my eyes were swollen from 17 hours of crying. When I walked toward the burial site, it didn't even look like a funeral. It looked like a Beverly Hills networking event. There was a sea of black designer suits, oversized Tom Ford sunglasses, and a fleet of matte black Range Rovers parked along the grass. At the front row, my mom and David were putting on the performance of a lifetime. They were dabbing fake tears while accepting condolences from LA's elite real estate moguls. But I didn't care about the crowd. All I cared about was the beautiful mahogany casket resting in the center. My dad. My legs felt like lead, but I pushed past the crowd. I just needed 1 second to say goodbye. But the exact moment I reached out to touch the edge of the open casket, a heavy hand grabbed my wrist and aggressively slapped it away. It was David. His face was twisted with absolute disgust. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, keeping his voice low but venomous enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "He's my dad, David," I choked out, tears instantly blurring my vision. "I just came to say goodbye." "You lost the right to call him family the second you abandoned us for your little overseas adventure," David sneered, pointing a finger directly in my face. "How dare you show your face here?" I looked past him, my eyes pleading with my mother. If you've ever listened to family drama stories or read Reddit family drama threads, you know how toxic families can be. But I honestly thought a mother's instinct would kick in at her husband's funeral. I thought she would at least tell David to back off. Instead, my mom lowered her sunglasses, looked me up and down like I was a piece of trash, and coldly raised her hand. "Security," she snapped. Before I could even process her betrayal, 2 massive, earpiece-wearing security guards flanked me. They firmly grabbed me by the arms. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises immediately," one of the guards ordered. In front of 500 high society guests, the whispers started. I could feel hundreds of eyes burning into my back as the guards literally dragged me away from my father's casket and physically escorted me out of the cemetery. I stood alone on the LA sidewalk, humiliated, utterly broken, and crying hysterically. But as I watched those heavy iron gates close in my face, something inside me snapped. The sorrow suddenly turned into a quiet, burning rage. I just didn't know yet that my dad had already set the ultimate revenge in motion. I spent the next 2 days completely isolated in a cheap motel near LAX. I didn't eat, I barely slept, and I definitely didn't call my family. Why would I? They had made their message painfully clear at the cemetery. In their eyes, I was dead to them. I even booked a flight back to Singapore for Thursday night, ready to leave this toxic nightmare behind forever. But on Thursday morning, exactly 3 days after the funeral, my phone rang. It was Richard Sterling, my dad's estate attorney. "I need you in my office at 2 p.m. today," Richard said. His voice was strictly professional, but there was a strange, unreadable edge to it. "It's regarding your father's last will and testament. Specifically, a video message he left behind." "I don't think my mother or David would appreciate me being there, Richard," I replied bitterly, remembering the humiliation at the cemetery. "They made it very clear I'm out of the family." "They don't have a choice in this matter," Richard interrupted smoothly. "And trust me, you are going to want to be here for this." At exactly 1:55 p.m., I walked into the plush, high-rise conference room in downtown Los Angeles. My mom and David were already sitting at the massive oak table, sipping sparkling water and practically vibrating with greed. They were whispering about liquidating my dad's commercial properties and which yacht they were going to buy. When they saw me walk in, the temperature in the room instantly dropped. "What is she doing here?" my mom snapped, slamming her glass down. David stood up, puffing out his chest. "Get her out, Richard. She's not getting a single dime of our money. We're not sharing this estate with someone who didn't even care enough to be around when Dad got sick." Richard didn't flinch. He calmly adjusted his glasses and pressed a button on a remote. A massive flat-screen TV at the end of the room flickered to life. "I am merely following Robert's explicit instructions," Richard said, looking directly at my mother. "He recorded this video 3 weeks ago, shortly after he was diagnosed with early-stage heart failure. He demanded that all 3 of you be present in this room to watch it together." The room went dead silent as my dad's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp, very sharp. He looked directly into the camera and said, "If you are watching this, it means I am gone, and it means it is finally time to tell the truth." Seeing my dad on that screen broke my heart all over again. I had to bite my lip to keep from sobbing in front of my family. Mom and David, on the other hand, just looked annoyed, shifting impatiently in their leather chairs, waiting for the part where they got their money. Dad took a deep breath on the video. "To my wife, Eleanor, and my son, David," he began, his voice devoid of any warmth. "For the past 10 years, I have watched you both treat my life's work as your personal ATM. You thought I didn't know." Mom's posture suddenly stiffened. David frowned, shooting a nervous glance at the lawyer. "Eleanor," Dad continued, "I know about the secret meetings you had with other lawyers, trying to figure out how to declare me medically incompetent so you could seize power of attorney. And David, I know you secretly remortgaged the Malibu beach house to pay off your massive gambling debts in Vegas. You both thought I was just a blind, foolish old man waiting to die." The silence in that conference room was deafening. My mom's face went completely pale, all the arrogance draining out of her Botoxed features. David opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. If you ever read Reddit family drama threads, you know there's nothing quite like the moment a toxic person's mask finally slips. Then, Dad turned his eyes directly to the camera, and his expression softened into a gentle, loving smile. "And to my beautiful daughter," he whispered, his eyes tearing up. "I am so sorry I didn't protect you from their toxicity while I was alive. You were the only one who loved me for who I was, not for my bank account. You flew across the world just to build your own life, because you didn't want my handouts." Dad straightened his posture, his business mogul persona returning. "Therefore, effective immediately, my entire $40 million estate, including all commercial properties, investment portfolios, and liquid cash, has been placed into an irrevocable trust. The sole, uncontested beneficiary of this trust is my daughter." My mom gasped, clutching her designer pearl necklace as if she was choking. "To Eleanor and David," Dad concluded coldly, "I leave you exactly what you deserve. Absolutely nothing. Not a single cent." The video clicked off, leaving the room in absolute, suffocating silence. The ultimate family revenge had just been served from beyond the grave. For a split second after the TV screen went black, you could hear a pin drop in that luxury conference room. Then, all hell broke loose. "This is illegal," my mother shrieked, jumping to her feet. Her voice was so shrill, it literally echoed off the glass walls. He was out of his mind. The medication made him crazy. I am his wife, and I am legally entitled to half of everything. David slammed his fist on the heavy oak table, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "You think you can get away with this, Richard? I'll tie this estate up in probate court for the next 20 years. I'll hire the most ruthless lawyers in California. She's not taking my money." Richard didn't even blink. He calmly opened a thick leather binder and slid a stack of legally bound documents across the table. "You can certainly try, David," Richard said smoothly, completely unbothered by their temper tantrums. But Robert anticipated this exact reaction. He had 3 independent psychiatrists evaluate his mental competence the very week he signed these papers. The trust is irrevocable, and the ironclad no contest clause means if you try to sue, you will be personally responsible for all legal fees. Which, considering you are both effectively broke, as of this morning, might be a huge problem. I sat there, completely frozen, trying to process the sheer magnitude of what was happening. If you love a true story revenge, you have to appreciate the genius of this. This was a masterclass in accountability, orchestrated by a man who finally saw his family for who they truly were. My mom collapsed back into her plush chair, practically hyperventilating. Broke? What do you mean broke? The Bel Air house is owned by Robert's holding company, Richard interrupted, which now belongs entirely to the trust, meaning it belongs to your daughter. You and David have exactly 30 days to vacate the premises before formal eviction proceedings begin. David slowly turned to look at me. The arrogant, wealthy bully who had ordered security to drag me away from my father's casket just 3 days ago was gone. In his place was a desperate, cornered man. You manipulated him, David hissed, taking a threatening step toward me. I slowly stood up, picking up my purse. I looked him dead in the eye, feeling absolutely no fear. I didn't manipulate anyone, David, I said softly. But I guess you shouldn't have kicked me out of the cemetery. You have 30 days. I walked out of Richard's office and stepped onto the busy streets of downtown LA. The warm California sun felt completely different on my skin. I wasn't just the rejected, grieving daughter anymore. I was now the sole controller of a $40 million empire. I immediately pulled out my phone and canceled my Thursday night flight back to Singapore. My father had trusted me to protect his life's work, and I wasn't going to run away this time. Richard was incredibly efficient. By Friday morning, he had legally authorized an executive expense account for me through the trust. I packed my bags, moved out of that depressing cheap motel near LAX, and checked into a quiet, secure suite at the Four Seasons. I needed a clear head for the legal storm that was coming. And boy, did it come fast. The harsh reality of their financial ruin must have hit my mother and David like a freight train over the weekend. Because by Sunday morning, my phone started blowing up. The exact same people who had security drag me out of a cemetery were now aggressively flooding my voicemail. If you listen to family revenge stories, you know exactly what the desperation phase sounds like. I sat on the balcony of my hotel suite, drinking a cup of coffee, and played the voicemails on speaker. The first one was from my mother. She was literally sobbing, her voice cracking with pure panic. "Honey, please, it's Mom. You have to understand, grief makes people do terrible things. We were just so heartbroken and overwhelmed at the funeral. You can't honestly kick your own mother out of her home. We are blood. Please, just call me back." The next voicemail was from David. His arrogant country club tone was completely gone. He sounded like a terrified little boy. "Hey, sis. Look, I messed up, okay? I shouldn't have grabbed you. But the Vegas bookies are threatening to break my legs if I don't pay them by the end of the month. Dad wouldn't want you to let me get hurt. Please, I need a loan. We need to talk." I just stared at my phone. A week ago, I would have given anything for my mother to call me honey, or for my brother to acknowledge me as his sis. But now, it just sounded pathetic. For 3 straight days, I completely ignored their calls. Not a single text back, not a single email. In my experience with true revenge stories, silence is often the most powerful weapon you have against toxic narcissists. It drives them absolutely insane when they realize they have lost control over you. On Wednesday morning, I scheduled a meeting with Richard. to begin officially liquidating a few minor assets to cover immediate estate taxes. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a voicemail. It was a direct message from my mother on Facebook, followed by a frantic text from David. "We are sitting in the lobby of the Four Seasons," David's text read. "We know you're staying here. Mom is having a panic attack in public. Please come down. Just 5 minutes." My heart pounded. They had somehow hired a private investigator or bribed someone to track my location. This is classic Reddit family drama. When toxic family members are cornered, they have zero respect for boundaries. I took a deep breath, slipped on my blazer, and rode the elevator down to the grand lobby. As soon as the doors opened, I saw them. It was almost laughable. Just a week ago, they looked like LA royalty at the funeral. Today, Mom's designer makeup was smudged, and David was wearing a wrinkled shirt, looking like he hadn't slept in days. As I walked toward them, Mom literally threw herself at me, sobbing hysterically and trying to grab my hands. "Please," she wailed, drawing the attention of several wealthy hotel guests. "Please, honey, I am begging you. You can't take the Bel Air house. I have nowhere to go. My country club friends will completely abandon me if I lose that house." I stared at her, feeling absolutely nothing. No pity, no guilt, just an overwhelming sense of clarity. "Your friends?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "Is that really what you're worried about right now? Not the fact that your husband died? Not the fact that you threw your own daughter out of a cemetery in front of hundreds of people? You're crying because you're embarrassed?" David stepped forward, trying to use his intimidating older brother posture. "Come on, stop being so dramatic. We said we're sorry. Now write a check so I can pay off these Vegas guys. Or things are going to get really bad for me." "Then things will get bad for you, David," I replied coldly, crossing my arms. David's jaw dropped. The entitlement was so deeply ingrained in him that he literally couldn't comprehend someone saying no to him. "Are you insane?" he hissed, stepping closer. "These are dangerous people. I owe them over $400,000. They'll take my cars, they'll ruin my credit. They might actually hurt me." "Then you should have thought about that before you gambled away hundreds of thousands of dollars while Dad was dying," I replied, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "You spent your whole life bullying me, David. You mocked me for moving away. You told me I wasn't part of this family. Well, congratulations. You finally got exactly what you wanted. I'm acting like a total stranger." Mom let out a theatrical gasp, wiping her mascara-stained face. "How can you be so cruel? This isn't how we raised you." "You didn't raise me," I snapped back, dropping the polite facade. "Dad raised me. You ignored me. And you know what the saddest part is? If you had just let me stand at that casket for 2 minutes, if you had just shown a shred of humanity at his funeral, I probably would have split the estate with you. I probably would have paid off your debts and let you keep the house, just to keep the peace." Their faces instantly drained of color as the reality of their own actions hit them. The ultimate irony of family revenge stories is that toxic people usually dig their own graves. "But you couldn't do it," I continued, speaking loudly enough for the hotel concierge to hear. "You had to humiliate me. You had to have security physically drag me out of my own father's funeral while you played the grieving widow. So no, you are getting exactly what Dad left you. Nothing." David's panic turned into pure, unchecked rage. "You greedy little quest." He lunged forward, raising his hand as if he was going to grab my arm or shove me. But I didn't even have to flinch, because before he could take a second step, 2 massive, earpiece-wearing hotel security guards intercepted him. They grabbed David tightly by both arms, locking him in place. I looked at the guards, then back at my brother, feeling an intense wave of poetic justice wash over me. "Escort them off the premises," I told the guards calmly. Watching David and my mother being physically dragged out of the Four Seasons lobby by security was the most surreal, full-circle moment of my life. Just a week prior, they had ordered goons to pull me away from my father's casket. Now, they were the ones being escorted out, humiliating themselves in front of dozens of staring hotel guests. If this were one of those Reddit stories, people in the comments would say it was too perfect to be true. But sometimes, karma truly doesn't miss. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly alongside Richard to execute the terms of the trust. True to his word, Richard had the Bel Air house legally transferred under a corporate entity solely controlled by me. I formally served my mother and David a 30-day eviction notice. They tried to fight it, of course. David hired a sleazy, late-night TV lawyer to contest the will, claiming my father was not of sound mind. But just as Richard predicted, the ironclad no contest clause triggered immediately. The moment they filed the paperwork, the judge threw it out, based on the 3 psychiatric evaluations my dad had smartly secured. Even worse, because they contested it, they were slapped with all of Richard's high-priced legal fees. On day 30, I parked my rental car across the street from the Bel Air mansion. I sat there in silence and watched as a cheap moving truck pulled out of the massive iron gates. I saw my mother crying in the passenger seat of David's rented Toyota. His luxury Range Rover had been repossessed the week prior to cover a fraction of his gambling debts. They had lost their country club memberships. They lost their designer lifestyle. They lost the respect of their superficial high society friends, who dropped them the second the money dried up. My mother moved into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown part of the valley, and David was forced to get a minimum wage job as a valet driver, ironically parking the same luxury cars he used to own, just to keep the Vegas loan sharks from breaking his legs. I didn't feel joy or triumph watching them leave. I just felt peace. The heavy, suffocating weight of being the family disappointment was finally lifted. I sold the Bel Air house a month later. I didn't want the memories. It's been exactly 2 years since that dramatic day at the hotel. A lot has changed since then. I worked closely with Richard to liquidate a large portion of my dad's commercial properties. But I didn't buy a massive yacht or a fleet of sports cars like David would have. Instead, I took a significant portion of that $40 million estate and established the Robert Memorial Foundation in honor of my dad. We provide full-ride scholarships for underprivileged students who want to study business overseas. I did this because my dad was the only person who supported my dream of building a life abroad. He believed in hard work, not entitlement, and I want his legacy to reflect exactly that. As for my mother and David, I have maintained strict, absolute zero contact. From what I hear through mutual acquaintances, David is still working night shifts just to keep his head above water, paying off the massive debts he accumulated. My mom spends her days in her tiny apartment, complaining to anyone who will listen about how her ungrateful, cruel daughter stole her life. She still refuses to take any accountability for how she treated me. But honestly, I don't care anymore. They are a closed chapter in my life. People who love reading drama stories online sometimes ask me if I ever feel a shred of guilt for leaving my own flesh and blood with nothing. My answer is always a solid, unwavering no. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, boundaries, and finally standing up to a lifetime of bullying. More importantly, this was an emotional revenge, orchestrated by a father who loved his daughter enough to protect her, even from the grave. I moved back to Singapore 6 months ago. I bought a beautiful penthouse overlooking the city, and I run my dad's foundation from my home office. I still miss him every single day. Sometimes, I still catch myself glancing at my phone on a Sunday morning, waiting for his weekly FaceTime call. But even though he's gone, I finally feel safe. He gave me the ultimate gift, freedom from a deeply toxic family, and for that, I will be forever grateful. Today, I learned something incredibly important from everything that happened. Sometimes, the best way to heal isn't to hurt people back. It's simply to walk away, protect your peace, and thrive. That is the ultimate true story revenge. What do you guys think? After my dad's will was revealed, did I do the right thing by evicting my mother and brother? Or should I have forgiven them? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. You can find thousands of Reddit stories and generic drama stories on the internet. But it hurts the most when the betrayal comes from your own flesh and blood. Those are the family stories that leave the deepest scars. But when karma finally catches up to toxic relatives, it creates the most satisfying family revenge. If you love diving into real-life family drama stories and spicy Reddit family drama, you are in the right place. I will be sharing more of these experiences here on Heirnova. So, if you enjoyed this emotional revenge tale and love hearing satisfying revenge stories, please support the channel. For those who can't get enough of family revenge stories or true revenge stories, make sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or follow the page if you're watching on Facebook. I'll see you in the next story.